Going to ceremonies was really helpful for me in seeing some of the ways that my mind worked. And I had a few really powerful experiences, but one that really stood out for me was healing around men. And it was this ceremony where I had probably, I would say, the darkest night I've ever had. I relived every single trauma that I had ever experienced on night one. And then on the second night, I actually became my mother and I went into her mental illness and I completely lost my mind.
I want to welcome you, Sheleana Aiyana, to the Bridging Connections podcast. By the way, I don't know if you know that that's the name of our podcast now.
I did not know that.
Used to be called Men This Way. We've just changed from Men This Way to Bridging Connections.
That's a good rebrand. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're getting good feedback, Tate. Have you noticed that? We're getting good feedback.
At least 2 pieces of feedback.
Well, Sylvie, my wife, immediately loved it.
Mine too. Okay, 4.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you reached out to have me, I was like, well, maybe my husband should be on the podcast. It sounded very only for male. Yeah, he totally should. But I think Bridging Connections is nice. It's a little bit more open and it just has a nice ring to it.
Yeah, thank you. We went on quite a long journey in that rebrand. And, like a lot of long journeys, we suffered for a year through hundreds of no, not quite right, until literally in a moment, it just snapped.
Nice.
And Tate, we both knew right away.
Yeah.
That was cool. It was kind of a fun journey.
Well, it wasn't a fun journey. It was a fun conclusion to the journey.
That's right, at the end. So, well, thank you for that feedback. So, Sheleana, I just want to introduce our audience to you, and then I want to start in a particular place. Sheleana Aiyana is the founder of Rising Woman, a growing community of more than 3 million readers. Her training and immersion in couples facilitation, inherited family trauma, family systems, conscious relationship, somatic healing, and plant medicines inform her holistic approach to seeing relationship as a spiritual path, which I so love that language as well, because I have long approached relationship work as the highest, as the most profound spiritual journey one can maybe, other than maybe parenthood. I don't know.
Totally.
So let's see, Shay's, is it okay if we call you Shay from here on out?
Yeah.
All right. Shay's, more than 30,000 women in 146 countries have taken her flagship program, Becoming the One, which is also the title of your book, which is available. Yeah. So welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome. We're really glad to have you. And, as Tate and I were talking about this conversation with you, something that just kept leaping out for me is the awareness that, all right, we're two men, white men at that, inviting you, the founder of Rising Woman, on to have a conversation with us, right? So I'm just curious. There's a few questions. Number one is, okay, we have a lot of men listeners from kind of what we used to be called Men This Way, right? We're more male focused. I know that every man listening should keep listening. I know that the conversation we're going to have is profound and profoundly relevant and important to men as well. Why do you think, what would you say that men definitely please keep listening because, and also I'm curious, just you as a woman, how does it feel for you coming into this room with Tate and I, not really knowing anything about us, probably? Curious.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to sell myself to all of the men listening.
It's not really what I meant, but I get it.
No, I think Rising Woman can be a bit of a deterrent when you hear the name, because obviously my whole body of work is mostly speaking to women. But what I find, especially having a husband who runs a really big men's organization, is that when you really sit down and talk to each other, we're all dealing with the same things. And I actually have some of my closest friends are men, and they reach out to me dealing with the same types of relationship anxiety, the same types of vulnerabilities and fears and relationship challenges that women do. It just manifests a little bit different, or it's associated more with shame, because we're sort of sold this idea in our culture that men shouldn't have relationship anxiety or that they don't feel those things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of beauty in having these conversations, especially between men and women, where we realize, oh, we're actually a lot more similar than we think.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, differences. It feels great for me to be joining you. My husband, he runs a men's organization. They have about 700 members around the world doing men's work. And so I get the joy and the pleasure of meeting many men from all over all of the time when he's hosting retreats or doing gatherings. And it's just a really special experience for me to get a more intimate look behind the curtain of what's going on for men in their hearts. And so it's just a nice flow for me to have conversations with men. And I think that it would be really beautiful if we did this more.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I also, I think some of the greatest revelations that I've had as a man were in moments where I learned something about a woman's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, being a man who wants to be connected to women. I mean, I'm married to a woman. I have 3 sisters. I have a mother, I have female friends. I mean, if I'm going to do relationship well with my wife, be friend to Tate's wife, right? And his daughter, Alexa, having understanding insight into the female experience on this planet is of vital importance, I've found.
Absolutely. And just having a mutual understanding of each other and how we work and not expecting each other to be the same. I think what we get wrong in relationship with the opposite sex, when that's the dynamic, is that we expect each other to think and to communicate like one another. And we're all expecting our partner to be like us, when in reality, we all tend to attract somebody who is in many ways opposite to us.
That's right.
And there's beauty to that. It can be really challenging. And what I've learned, in my almost 10 years of relationship with Ben is that we tend to attract people who can complement us, or we can go to war with them because we're so different.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Ben and I really learned how to bridge our skill sets, and I love, bridging connections, so we'll use that word here, we've learned where he shines and where I shine. And actually, when we put our skill sets together in the way that we think, the way that we create, the way that we dream, it's the perfect team. And it takes effort to get there. And I see that in pretty much all relationships across the board, especially when it comes to the conversation around male-female relationships.
Yeah, Sylvie and I, we've also been together almost 10 years. And, she's also, she's practiced as a therapist, a relationship coach. I've been a relationship coach for, I don't know, going on 12, 13 years. Yeah. It's natural that we would seek to work together and build something together, right? Natural. And at the beginning of our relationship, oh my God, we attempted that. And it was torture at times.
Why?
Well, it's more like alchemy, I would say. Yeah. By which I mean, in alchemy, there's a lot of fire, a lot of fire and heat and intensity in the spirit of alchemy, right? But what comes out on the other side is gold. And that's what would happen for us. Like Sylvie and I, we put our heads together, we work, we collaborate. I believe we create gold because we bring such complementary brains and experiences to the table. But because we're also so different, if we're not really thoughtful and mindful and patient, and oh my gosh, we can just quickly, we're both hard-headed, we're opinionated, we're strong-minded, we're alphas in our own worlds,
It's a challenging combination.
It definitely can be. How about you and Elsa, Tate?
Oh, good question. My wife is so beautifully helpful in reminding her that when I get frustrated in the ways that she isn't like me, that she is bold, and rightly so, by saying, "You wouldn't like me if I was just like you. You would not be attracted to me. We wouldn't work. Could you imagine?" And then she gives me examples about the ways in which, like, meeting me would not be very much fun. So, I think what you're saying, Shay, is absolutely true. And what you're saying, Bryan, is absolutely true, is that when you can find the ways in which you complement each other and are willing to go through the fire of the journey of that, there's real magic that can happen inside of relationships that are willing to do that and don't just live in the frustration of the differences and allow the frustration to fester.
Yeah. And it's also okay to create channels for it. You know, for Ben and I, we're both very stubborn. We're both alphas. We're both strong leaders. And so we've actually intentionally stayed in our own lanes when it comes to business. We do collaborate. We do podcasts together, or we do, you know, a workshop here and there for a presentation or something like that. We don't run a business together, and we never will. We know that would not be good, because we're able to channel our individuality, our independence, our own sense of inner leadership in that area. And then it takes practice for us to not try to lead each other all day long. Right. So we've had to make this commitment. Even it was one of our wedding vows that we would notice when we were trying to lead each other, and instead take that energy and channel it together somewhere good.
I like that.
Because it's a challenge. And I think there are some couples in a more easeful dynamic for a lot of people, is that there's one person who's more happy to lead and one person who's more happy to follow. And it's not by any means like a submission domination dynamic. It's just more energetic. But when you get to people who are very alpha in nature, let's say, it can be more challenging, and you do need to practice probably for longer because there can be more conflict.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm really present to, and Bryan and I were kind of talking about this on the front end, is that a lot of people, your work is a calling. You founded Rising Woman, and I don't know a ton about your story. I'm thrilled to be diving into this, but a lot of people find, my guess is that you found Rising Woman, that calling through struggle. And, you know, I guess one of the things I'm curious to just learn more about you is, you know, what would you say is, I don't know, your founding struggle? What was foundationally necessary for you to go through to enable you to build a platform where you're bringing medicine to the world in the way that you are?
Yeah, there's a lot of different foundational moments, I would say, that led me here, starting off right with my birth imprint. I never met my father. My mother was only 22. She was struggling with mental illness. She was struggling with alcoholism, severe, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder from a horribly abusive childhood, had no idea how to parent. She had literally been unmothered in the most severe way. And we were on the run from the moment I was born. We were snuck out the back door of the hospital because my father was pursuing us to take me. Wow. And this is a person she had known for 2 months who had actually put her in the hospital before she gave birth. So it wasn't a safe person. So there's sort of this imprint in me, you know, of a runner that I've carried throughout my life that I'm still working through. But you can imagine with that story, there was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of abandonment. I started entering into foster homes at 3 years old. There were a lot of traumatic moments that happened in those homes, in and out. And by the time I was 12, I was ward of the government. So the government was my legal guardian. So I essentially had this invisible parent that could tell me that I couldn't do certain things, just based on liability. But there was no nurturance, there was no care, and there was really nobody that even saw me. I was just a piece of paper. So, you know, they wouldn't let me get my license when I was 16, but nobody would even tell me that. It was just a message that was passed on through, a social worker. And I moved out on my own when I was 16, and I started to work 2 jobs, and I homeschooled myself. And by the time I was 19, I found myself in an incredibly abusive relationship that I'm lucky to have survived. And that leaving that relationship also led me to a series of other extremely chaotic events. And once I got myself out of that, I had my first spiritual awakening, let's call it. I remember feeling very alive. I started waking up every morning at 5 a.m. full of energy. I was having these visions of myself surrounded by friends and being really happy and of service to the world. And I was really on fire. And that's when I started to explore spirituality, not necessarily healing, but for me, that was my entry point. And as I got older, you know, in my early 20s, I meet somebody and he's the safest person that I've ever dated, even though he was also a walking red flag and he was from another country. And so he and I got married for him to be able to stay in the country so we could continue our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I lost everything. My money, I was deeply betrayed. Everything was taken from me. My cat, my dear cat, left. Everything that I knew fell apart. I had been running a business that was stolen from me. It was defrauded from me. And I gained 30 pounds overnight. My body broke out in a rash. I went to the naturopath. My hormones were completely plummeting. All I had coursing through my veins was cortisol. And yet there was this really important moment when he was driving off with another woman. And I felt this sense of panic rushing through my body. And I watched him drive off. And I just started having a flashback of when I was 3 years old and I was kicking and screaming in the arms of these strangers who my mom had just dropped me off with in the night. And this was the first moment I had ever been dropped off at a foster home. She had packed me up, told me we're going for a drive, and then just put me in the arms of these people, got in her car and drove away. And I felt 3 again. And so in that moment, it was so powerful because I was relieved that it wasn't actually about him and that I had the power to heal, because this was actually about me and my unfinished business. And that's when I dove into transpersonal therapy. I started doing medicine ceremonies every weekend. I was doing breath work. I really dove in head first. And then I began, after many years, apprenticing with my transpersonal therapist and spiritual teacher. And then I went on to train in all sorts of other modalities that you kind of listed in the beginning. But that's how I got here. And so Rising Woman originally was just an outlet for me to share my writing. And it was a place of service. And then eventually it grew into what it is now.
Shay, one of the things that you just said that just really, I'm really just so interested in. Oh, well, first, I just want to I'm profoundly moved by the journey that you've been on and the resilience and the fortitude and the open-heartedness that you've had to have through your life, and to have your life be making such a difference. You know, that notion of, you know, when our mess becomes a part of our message, that's when we're living in our purpose. And I just want to acknowledge you for being an extraordinary woman who's being a light in the world right now. And you were giving distinction between the spiritual path and the healing path.
Yes.
Could you talk just more about that?
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make. The healing path cannot be confused with the spiritual path. The spiritual path is the exploration of perhaps our soul. There can be all sorts of things that we enjoy during that time. You know, I loved to explore crystals and meditation and past lives and all of those things. And those are really necessary things to explore. And there's still, some of them are still a part of my life. The healing path is the deeper work around exploring our own relationship imprints, our own nervous system wiring, our family of origin, our inherited family trauma, the patterns that we're carrying into relationship. What has not been grieved? What have we not felt or mourned or processed? Because all of that unfinished business and that unprocessed pain finds its way into our relationships. So even though I felt quite spiritual, I was learning to observe my mind, and I was reading motivational material, and I had my little altar with my crystals out, I hadn't touched any of my pain. I had completely dismissed it. So I was actually incredibly guarded, completely afraid to be vulnerable, very defensive, completely unconscious to the role that I was playing in my relationship patterns until that point of awakening.
Totally spiritual.
Yeah, it's totally spiritual, but it's void of that other piece. And we see that a lot too. You know, you could be a Reiki master, and you could be able to do all sorts of powerful things with your energy. But if you haven't worked through some of that other pain and unresolved tension in your nervous system, that's where your relationship patterns will highlight what's left for you.
I mean, that rings so true for my journey as well. And that I did so much spiritual work, whatever the meaning, ayahuasca. I did ayahuasca probably 25 times over an 8-month period in my early 30s. And it was profound. There was so much there for me to see and witness. And it was a profound spiritual awakening. Meanwhile, I'm in a relationship with a human woman that is a complete fucking catastrophe. I have no idea how to be in actual relationship with a person, but I didn't know that. I thought, well, look at how spiritual I am. Look at all these awakenings I'm having. Look at all the things I'm seeing. If anything, it became an arrogance, right? Look at all that I'm awake to. And, look, you poor person over there, you don't see what I see. Oh my God, what an ass I could be in that place. And then it's just so common in the, so it's interesting because one of the things that really stood out for me too is knowing that you're almost 10 years into a relationship with Ben.
Yeah.
Look, everyone has some challenge in their childhood for the most part. I certainly, have my own version of that. It took me 7 years to really trust in relationship with Sylvie. Not trust Sylvie. She's wildly trustable as a human, but trust in relationship with her. And I'm just so present to, your life experience should teach you and probably taught you cannot trust in people. There's no one there for you. No one really has your back. Right. And probably, more messages beyond that, surely. And yet here you are. Right. Trusting. I mean, I'm making some leaps here, but here you are, trusting in relationship. You're being in relationship with a man. Again, I want to acknowledge you for that. Like Tate said, the open-hearted, the commitment to growing, to keeping an open heart, to transmuting your pain and your past into medicine, not just for the world, but for yourself, for your daughter as well. So
well, and I mean, staying sometimes is the accolade itself. Some days I'm just like, well, I'm here. I'm letting myself be in relationship. I'm letting myself be surrounded by community. Some days that's good enough. Other days I'm having a really good time. And it is hard. It's, when your whole initial imprint is chaotic and laced with abandonment and betrayal, and there's nobody there who's consistent, that really does create this sense of lone wolf isolation in the psyche. And so we have to be really aware of that. And when I was younger, and when I was even in my 20s, there was a really strong ego. There was a lot of defensiveness. I wouldn't really let anybody in. There's also a lot of insecurity. So I didn't believe that I was good enough or that I was worthy. So in that, I just didn't put myself in situations where I could get close. And that takes time to de-armor and to work our way through that and to get to a place where we are just comfortable being ourselves and being seen. And also being able to trust our bodies and know that the people that we choose are correct for us.
Yeah. But, people, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and my daughter is in love with the idea of love. It's such a precious thing. And she's already had something traumatic happen to her. And the battle of trusting herself to know who she can trust and who she can't, based upon, I really get the seeds have already been planted for her to not fully trust the world. And there is still this part of her that loves this idea of finding the one. Right. But you have done this beautiful job of kind of flipping that idea on its head with this idea of becoming the one. So can you just talk a little bit more about maybe what helped you turn that on its head, and what does it actually mean to become the one?
We're all sold in the romantic comedies and in our culture on the idea of finding the one, that person that's going to complete us, that's going to make us whole. And all of the other people that we've dated where it has gone wrong with, they just weren't the right person. And if only we can swap them out for the one, everything will be better. And these problems that we're facing will just magically disappear.
Yeah.
Now, we're starting to catch on to the reality that that is not true. And the only person that we are guaranteed to be in relationship with for the rest of our lives is ourselves. So our relationship to self is foundational, and it's the foundation from which all other relationships either falter or flourish. And it's the most important relationship for us to invest in. Because if we don't have a clear idea of how our body communicates yes and no to us, how we feel when we're in alignment and when we're out of alignment, then how do we trust any of our decisions? And how do we draw in the kinds of people that we can really be ourselves with and relax with and celebrate life with? And so there is this turning the tables and no longer looking for somebody outside of us to complete us or make us whole, and to realize we're already whole. I used to have a spiritual teacher who would say, the only purpose of the one is to confirm you as whole and complete. And that sums it up perfectly for me.
What do you think are some of the biggest red flags that people overlook? If that idea of becoming the one versus finding the one implies that, I'm out there looking for, and not that there's no truth to that. I mean, I want someone who's going to be kind and generous. And I mean, there are certain qualities and traits that I think make for a healthy relationship that I want.
For sure.
Right. It's not to say that there's nothing out there to look for, but I'm curious, what do you think are some of the biggest red flags that people overlook?
Well, beyond overlooking red flags, there is a dismissal of the body's warning of this doesn't feel right. And so before we even begin looking at the red flags, I invite you to start to tune into your body more.
Great. Yeah.
And to really be able to feel your energy, your nervous system, what's happening when you are with this person. Is there a relaxation or is there a tightening? Is there a feeling of spaciousness for you to be yourself, or is there a holding back? And of course, some of this stuff is our own programming, but the truth is when we're with somebody who is safe, there is an opening that can occur. And so pay attention to that first.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is really not dismissing the things that really don't feel good for you in your body. And I think a lot of times in those early stages, those moments present when there is some sort of conflict or some sort of disruption to that person's expectations or their routine. And that's where you can start to notice their character. How do they treat people when they're under stress? How do they treat you when you're under stress? What happens when you're under stress together? Now, I think as a person who's been in relationship for 10 years and for, you, Tate, I don't even know how long you've been in relationship. I'm assuming a long time.
18 years.
Yeah.
Married.
So you know that, learning how to deal with stress together is a challenge. And it's unrealistic to tell people who are out there looking for a partner that they're going to find somebody and you're just going to rock it from the start. Expect bumps. We're 10 years in, we're still figuring out how do we stay cool together under stress and turn toward each other instead of against each other. So the expectation that it's going to be all blissful and easy right away, I don't want to put that on the table. Now, but there's a difference between that and just totally unsafe or really dismissive. And so we can pay attention to those things. And for me, the goal is always, how can we become a better team? Does this person want to be a team? Do they view relationships as a partnership? I actually met the person that I was in an abusive relationship with when I was 19. He said, one person needs to be in charge in the relationship, and that's going to be me. And I was like, well, that doesn't actually work for me. I don't want that. And you would think that for me, I would have walked at that point. There were so many red flags. I had complete intuition and vision of what was going to play out, but I stayed because that's all I knew was chaos and unsafe people at that stage of my life. So sometimes what we have to do is we have to take space from dating, take space from relationship for a bit to work on that piece, that body listening and that trust. And then we just are attracted to something more true.
Yeah. Well, I think that underscores, I think, the importance of being willing to do healing work, therapy, shadow work, that the introspective work, because just because something feels familiar doesn't mean, which might feel safe in a way, just because it's familiar. What is familiar in a way feels safe. But if you had emotionally absent father, an emotionally absent man, or for that woman, emotionally absent woman, might feel safe, might feel it's familiar. Oh, this feels like home.
Yeah.
And until we explore those things and get some space so that we can see them, I think that really underscores the importance. But
can I just pause you for 1 second, Bryan? Because I think one of the things that's coming up for me is the combination of two things. Bryan has this beautiful distinction, I think, that is true, which is that it takes about 10 years of really working on the relationship until you really there's workability inside the relationship. And what you're speaking to, Shay, is like how important it is both for the internal journey and for you to be checking in to your body and doing that. And we're talking about this word healing, which is like the individual healing journey that's necessary. Couple that with the 10-year healing journey that a couple has to go through to find their way of rubbing up against each other and all the ways that we need to heal with one another, and really the convergence of those two worlds, and how important it is for us individually to be doing our healing work, and to know that there's a decade of healing work to do together in order for us to really find our way.
Absolutely. Or even more. And I mean, my husband's parents have been married for over 45 years, I think, and they're still working it out.
Yeah.
Relationships are difficult because we choose somebody who mirrors to us our unfinished business, and we choose somebody whose greatest challenge is giving us the thing we need most. This is an imago principle. I trained with Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, Getting the Love You Want, and this is just how it is. And so also taking the pressure off of this person being our everything, and knowing that that is not reality. And you can have a partner who loves you and respects you and cherishes you, and that you're good friends, but you're still not going to meet each other's every need, and you're not going to see eye to eye all the time.
Yeah.
And that really is okay. And if you are able to open yourself in those moments and take a pause and just take a breath and try to remember that they are innocent at their core, then it can relieve some of that tension.
I like to remind, when I work with couples, I like to remind them of a few things. One, that we are all innocent in our ignorance. If we knew how to do this stuff better, we'd do it better. I've personally have never met anyone, certainly never worked with anyone, who went into a relationship thinking, I can't wait to fuck up this person's life. I haven't seen it. I'm sure it's out there, but I don't see it. And that other piece, the 10 years, I'll usually, I've worked with couples as well that have been together 40 plus years.
Yeah.
And whether they've been together for 2 years or 20 years, I'll use that distinction and say, you've just started working at this relationship. Expect it to take 10 years to get really good at being with each other. And I don't mean that because it will take 10 years. Sylvia and I did it in 7, I think. but I say that.
You also skipped the 3rd grade.
That's right. We're in the AP. We're in the AP class. I only say that because it's like a gut check for people. Like, if they go 10 fucking years, I can't do that with this bozo. I'm out. Or if they say, well, 10 years, it seems like a long time, but you know what? It gives me hope.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, okay, all right. That's the spirit. If you're willing to spend 10 years at this, you got a shot.
Well, fair enough. And you don't have to want it with that person.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good marker for people. Is this the person you want to put in that time with? Is it worth investing in? Not every relationship is that. That's okay.
No, that's right. And I'm really curious to hear from you, Shay, because one of the things that, Tate and I, we have this program called Elevate Your Relationship, which is like a men's group program for men committed to improving their relationships. Like men, this is men gathered only. We're talking about relationship work. I think it's unprecedented in the history of humankind. men in a room talking about relationships.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's often a revelation for these men is when they start to learn, again, as I said earlier, about women having a different experience from us, particularly around safety.
Yeah.
Like a lot of men do not even think, they think so long as I'm not hitting her, she's safe. She has nothing to fear. Why would she feel afraid? Right? It doesn't even occur. I'm curious just to hear from you, like, what do you want men to really get about women's experiences, maybe in the world, in relationship, whatever? What do you think men need to know that we generally don't know that would help us, bridge the connection between us?
Yeah, this is a great lead in, actually, because we were talking about ayahuasca earlier, and I do kind of want to loop back to that and share a personal story about some of the ways that I actually had pretty profound healing moments in those ceremonies. But to start, we are having a different experience than men all of the time. When I sit in the kitchen with a bunch of my female friends, and then my husband's there, and he's listening to how often we are afraid just walking to our cars, or if somebody's walking behind us on the sidewalk, I feel very uncomfortable. If I'm walking on the sidewalk and there's a man a few feet behind me, I'm very aware of that. I'm looking back, I'm checking him out. I'm probably crossing the street. I'm assessing. I'm always sort of aware that there could be a threat. If I'm walking down the street and a truck or a van drives by, my nervous system feels that. And I wonder, is this person going to try to pull over and throw me into the back of their truck? If I see a van, am I safe right now? Should I walk by this van? Should I walk behind those doors? Or should I cross the street to walk so that they can't jump out and grab me? Right. So I'm always assessing. And of course, given my history, you can imagine I probably have a little bit more of that. But it's just that way for women. And there's little things that create safety. When I'm sharing my feelings with my husband and he starts trying to fix them, or he starts dismissing me because it doesn't make sense, I don't feel safe. We had an instant recently where we went out somewhere and we were with our daughter, and he walked ahead of me and he thought that I could see where he was going. He went into a store. I didn't see where he went, and I couldn't find him for about 10 or 15 minutes. And I was pretty upset about it. And I said to him, next time I really need you to just tell me that you're going to stick with me, because when we go somewhere together, that's how I feel safe. When we're together and you prioritize wherever I am instead of your mission. And that's really hard for men, right? Men are mission driven. Men have a plan, and women are not often operating on that wavelength. We're focused on relationship and connection. Now, of course, there's crossover, but it does matter. Yeah. And so it's all of these little moments that make such a difference.
Well, I think, again, my own personal experience as well. And we men, I think we walk into a room or we're walking on a street, we're just assessing, is there any physical danger here? Yeah. And the moment, so long as I look around and go, yeah, no. And we're also great minimizers, we minimize. Oh my God, Tate and I do in our men's work, like we do a check-in, like a body check-in. What am I feeling? Men are constantly feeling a little bit upset. I feel a little bit anxious, a little hungry, like constantly minimizing of everything. Our dog, our golden retriever, she has really bad skin allergies. We're here in Texas at the moment where they really flame up, and it almost looked like yesterday morning I found it like a flap of skin hanging off of her chin. And Sylvie's like, it's time to take her to the doctor. And I'm like, let's give it a couple of days. I'm sure it's fine. But Sylvie she is in charge of the dog's health. We agreed she has 51% ownership of that decision, because if I have ownership, the dog would probably be dead already. So she gets 51% ownership. We've decided. So she should
be in charge then. 100% made the right decision on that.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Right.
She takes the dog to the vet this morning. I just saw her a couple hours ago when she got back, and the dog, they shaved her face. There were lots of things going on in her face that you couldn't see because of the fur. Yeah. Right. That minimizing that we men do, which I think is on some level we have to. I mean, we're navigating a complex world. We have to shut things out. We have to some degree. Okay, nothing to see here. Like you said, mission driven. Is this going to affect my mission? Nope. Then let's keep going. And I really get, and my wife has been my greatest teacher in that regard, as you're speaking to. I could just so see me and Sylvie in the exact same situation as you and Ben. And those, having the same, like, I just disappeared and I'm walking out, I'm finding her 15 minutes later going, hey babe, did you have a good adventure without me?
Yeah.
And she's like, where the F have you been?
Yeah.
How could you? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Cool, bro.
So anyway, how do you navigate that? How do you bridge those gaps?
Yeah, I mean, that's again something that we're still working on. I think it takes extra long when you have a very logical person also navigating a more emotional person, which is Ben and I, right? For him, he's just hyper logical. He would have been an amazing engineer. And so, he has a very analytical, logical brain. So for him, it's just facts. And for me, it's not facts at all.
Right.
So we're working on that. But I think one of the keys is really stepping out of the facts and also stepping out of the feelings that are amplified in the moment, just taking a pause and really trying to understand each other's reality and perspective.
Yeah.
And seeing the innocence, really just assuming the best, which is not always easy. No. And it's also what my husband explains to me is that sometimes in those moments, he gets defensive because he feels like he failed. And when he feels like he failed, his defenses go up. And so it might be really hard for him in the moment sometimes to acknowledge that he hurt my feelings, and he's more defending his behavior, which just causes me to feel even more unheard. And so we're practicing really me coming at him with more gentle language and asking for what I need, and for him to really hear the need and not the criticism, or for him to have shame around it. Right?
I want to make sure, I mean, that's a whole thread we could continue on, and maybe we will, but I want to make sure that we get back to you said you wanted to share something about your ayahuasca experience. Yeah,
well, I think it's important because we sort of touched on it, and there's definitely a lot of bypassing that happens in those medicine circles. So I don't want to dismiss that at all. I've seen it firsthand. And I think with proper integration and the proper curanderos who are really thoroughly trained in a lineage, and it's a solid container, there can be a lot of healing. It's just not for everybody, especially if their nervous systems are in a really dysregulated place. But, my husband has sat probably over 75 times. He still works with the medicine in a much more regimented way than I do. I've stepped out of it because for me, I'm just too sensitive. I don't really need that anymore. But initially in those first 5 or so years of our relationship, going to ceremonies was really helpful for me in seeing some of the ways that my mind worked. And I had a few really powerful experiences. Some are written in my book, so I don't need to repeat those. But one that really stood out for me was healing around men. And it was this ceremony where I had probably, I would say, the darkest night I've ever had. I relived every single trauma that I had ever experienced on night 1. And then on the second night, I actually became my mother, and I went into her mental illness, and I completely lost my mind.
Wow.
And I was so afraid. And because I'm a runner, I think that when I'm uncomfortable, I could just move my body to a new environment and somehow that will escape the feeling. And that doesn't work, turns out, but I still try. So I left the ceremony space, and we're in this place where there's actually quite a distance from the ceremony space to the house. And there's a long trail of candles just lighting the path, and it's dark out. And I somehow just completely under the substance of ayahuasca make myself to the house, and I get into the bathroom and I collapse onto the floor. And at this point I'm trapped. I can't get up. I keep trying and I can't. I keep falling back down. I'm sitting up and I'm falling back down. And I'm in this bathroom for who knows how long. and I'm just having a journey, and I'm having these flashbacks of my mom's history and things that she went through even before I was born. It was quite intense. And a few hours go by, and I somehow make my way out into the hallway, and I'm holding onto the wall. And then this man walks in, and he's bald and he's covered in tattoos. He has a jaguar tattoo, and he's been sitting with the medicine for a long time. And we just stopped. We stare at each other, and he's kind of hunched over and holding onto his thighs, and I'm holding onto the wall, and we make gaze. And I just look at him, and he looks at me, and then he says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay." And he said, "Let me take you back." And I said, "I'm not going back there. I'm not going back to the ceremony room. No way." And so he goes, "Okay, well, at least let me take you to the couch." And he takes me to the couch, and it's completely pitch black. Like I can barely see once we go into that room. And he lays me down on the couch and covers me with a blanket. And then he says, "I'm just going to sit here on the floor next to you, if that's okay." And he just sits quietly for a really long time next to me. And he's just keeping watch over me. And eventually he says, "Okay, it's really time to go back now." And I said, "I'm not going back." And he said, "Well, I'm going back. Will you come with me?" So finally he convinces me, and, he helps me up. I'm holding onto his arm, and he says something funny on the way, and I giggle, and he just drops me off at my mat next to Ben, who's like writhing and uncomfortable and doesn't even know where I am. But it's not kosher, especially when you don't know the curandero well, which we didn't yet, for couples to disappear together. So he didn't come looking.
And curandero, just for listeners that may not know, means the healer, the holder of the ceremony, essentially, the shaman leading the ceremony.
Yes, and we've worked with the same shaman for like about 10 years now, our whole relationship. So, but this was, early on. And he drops me off at my mat and then just leaves. And even that moment, I was like, oh, he just didn't harm me, didn't try to assault me, which, at that point in my life, I hadn't had that many experiences with men that hadn't tried to take advantage of me. And then Ben just, he held me for a bit, and I had some really beautiful visions. And then the shaman called on me, and I crawled up to the front. If they call on you, you come up to the front. And there's 2 male shamans and his son there, who was a helper. And one of the shamans, he's an indigenous man, and he had a giant drum, like I'm talking huge. And the other shaman, who's the one we work with consistently, he just looked at me and he said, "Where's your family?" And I said, "They're all gone." And I just collapsed into a little ball facing the ground. And he starts working on me, and this other indigenous shaman is banging this giant drum, singing over me. They're both singing over me. I'm wailing, and I have these 2 men touching me. Like the shaman, he's touching my hands, and he's doing all these things. And I'm just noticing, like, oh, I'm actually safe. They're not trying to take advantage of me again. And then at the end, the son comes up to walk me back to my mat, and he escorts me back to my mat. And he takes me back, and then I just kind of fall into my bed. And then he just turns immediately and walks away. And I noticed myself be surprised by that. Like, all of these men along the path just helped me and then just left. And they didn't ask for anything, and there was no energetic thread. And I realized that was actually my first experience of ever having that with men. Wow. And that is, I think, a turning point for me, where I really opened to healing with men. So I wanted to share that, because working with medicines like that can be really healing, provided that there is a container for integrating afterwards, because you can be left with a lot of material to sort through at the end.
Wow, it's quite a story. I'm sure someone listening who's never experienced ayahuasca, they're going to have one of 2 reactions. Oh my God, sign me up. Where can I go for an amazing experience? Or, oh my God, keep that away from me. I never, ever, ever want to put myself in that kind of place.
Totally.
As you're sharing that, I'm, especially towards the end, is like the lesson and your experience of these men that were there to just genuinely serve you, help you through the experience you're having, and extract nothing from you. Yeah. I'm reminded, I think that was a theme that first really came alive for me early in my writing days. You remember there was this viral video, this woman walking through New York. Her boyfriend filmed her walking through New York, and all the cat calls that she was getting, all of the men that would even insult her if she didn't smile, if she didn't, acknowledge them in some way for the compliments they were giving that she wasn't asking for.
Yeah.
I remember I wrote about that in this article, how to compliment a woman. And the bottom line is freely, without asking anything in return. That's how you compliment a woman, without trying to extract anything, even a thank you or a smile. And I think what you're sharing, Shay, and it's something that Tate and I also bring into our work with men and in the relationship work we do, is trying to help these men become the kind of men that can show up for their partners without needing to extract anything from them for their offerings. And I don't think men really understand how healing that is, or how healing that can be for women, because most have never experienced that, really.
Never. There's a lot of women who have not. And there's a lot of women who probably don't even believe it's possible. Right. As a person who works, I have tens of thousands of women who come through my programs. And a lot of times they come in not even believing that men could be good to them.
Right.
So it's quite the journey in healing together. And that's why I actually love the containers where men and women get to come together to do this work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of healing and just seeing each other in our fears and our vulnerabilities and actively working together to heal.
And I really want men listening just hear how sacred that is. And I'm not, you shared a big story at a ceremony that most people will probably never experience. But I mean, just the man who lives in the same house with a woman, and so many husbands will do things and then expect their wives to, give them sex. That's one of the most common cliche almost expectations that get sets up. And by the way, it happens in reverse too. I mean, women, have their own expectations of things.
We sure do.
But I think I just really want to emphasize that that's sacred work to be able to be in service, as a man, to just be in service in small ways to a woman and ask nothing in return for it.
Shay, one of the things I'm also present to, right, for the woman listening that's not necessarily drawn to do medicine work right now, but is in that place where they just do not trust men, that they've been harmed, that they don't maybe even trust themselves to select the kind of man that want to go on a journey with, because the choices in the past haven't served them. What are the steps for a woman like that knows that she's stuck, she wants to be free, but she doesn't know how to go on that journey to rise, so to speak? What's your message to her?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the whole premise of my book, Becoming the One. It's all about building that relationship to yourself. And that first foundation really does come down to exploring your original wounds, understanding what your template is for love and relationship. What is your nervous system wired for? What is your mind wired for? A lot of times when we're holding on to our past pain or we haven't processed it yet, as I had said before, we're actually only able to see what we know. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see the things that we want to see, right? And so exploring that really deeply, doing that mother and father work, working with those archetypes in the mind, working with your own sense of brokenness and your own sense of wholeness, and understanding what it feels like when you're safe. And how does your body tell you that you're not safe? This is deeper nervous system work. Yeah. And then we have other things like, what are your core values? What is it that you actually stand for? And in your past relationships, you were still being led by values. You just might have prioritized the wrong ones. And so getting to know that, you can stay true to your values. That's also going to help you align with a partner, as long as you have activated your voice and you feel confident being truthful about who you really are and what you actually want, and risking them not wanting the same thing and falling away. That's a clarification for you. And that's important.
Beautiful. So helpful.
Well, I mean, there's so much more that we could explore. I mean, your Instagram page is filled with just beautiful, beautiful thoughts and reflections. And I mean, you have a post up there pinned around grief and love being inseparable. And I just want to share this. We won't go down this rabbit hole. We want to wrap up, but it really, really touched me, given just all that Sylvia and I are going through with loss and grief in our lives. And grief and love are inseparable, yet we live in a world that teaches us to fear grief. And in doing so, we learn to fear love. But grief is simply love with nowhere to go. Oh, that's a good one. Simply love with nowhere to go. Feeling it means you've lived bravely, you've loved, and you are fully awake to the wild, tender experience of being human. I mean, that just so speaks deeply to me these days. And Sheleana, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Other than your Instagram profile page is Rising Woman. Everyone, men, women, go follow her there. It's beautiful, beautiful sharings there. Where else can people find what you're up to and connect with you?
My website is risingwoman.com, and I also have my personal website and profiles, which are sheleanaaiyana.com and at Sheleana Aiyana. Beware, if you follow me on my personal page, I also post a lot of photos of where I live in nature and also the things that I like to cook. And my books are available worldwide. I also have a journal that you can get in most bookstores. We're on Amazon. It's published in about 18 other languages right now, and more are coming. And I'm continuing to write more books. So that's the way that I like to communicate with the world.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Well, we support you. We support rising women, rising women. We're all in on that. We know. I mean, anyway, blah, blah, blah. We love you. Thank you so much, Jay.
So grateful.
I really appreciate your time. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.